What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous, dripping with fantabulousness co-host of the number one sports podcast in the history of not just the podcast, but the galaxy. There just might be some more podcasts been around even more than our history. So the number one podcast in the galaxy of all time. Grant Hughes, how the heck are you doing?
In the multiverse, maybe even, right? Like we should expand it. I keep wondering
how your downloads are and some of them, like the different dimensions that we exist in, but they're pretty high.
When you're trying to get ad spots, you could really sell it as like, well, in this universe, we get this many downloads, but like, who can say?
So it's interesting though, because someone had reached, and this happens a lot, and I always feel bad because I feel like I can't offer the best advice, and I'm such a cynic. But I had someone like an up and comer, like kind of just reach out and ask for advice on, mastering their own podcast. And they had said to me, like, how did you guys like build what you have? And so what I said, listen, Draymond, you just have to be your authentic self, and the downloads, the audience, the community, the loyalty will come. And then he proceeded to, we'll see if he incorporates that feedback. So this was after one of the Inside the NBA, his two Inside the NBA appearances.
Good luck to him. I hope he does. Yeah. I hope he works it out. I thought you were going to say, well, the first thing you're going to want to do is work for no money for a fair number of years. You're also going to want to not sleep, obsess over every detail, really take criticism to heart, soldier on, and then eventually you too can be, you can be the number 2 podcast, I guess, in the galaxy.
Can't touch us at this point.
Sorry, we're not giving you all the
secrets. Did you think at any point in that preamble that I was telling a real story, that it wasn't going to be
all of it? All of it was real. I thought
it was a good point. How are you doing, Grant?
I'm doing fine, doing well. We have let's see, I'm trying not to step on like when we're recording this. The games are still great, like just across the board. I did a radio hit yesterday, and I like caught myself saying like every Pacers Knicks game has been awesome, and meanwhile there have been like more than one significant blowout. But it's like, yeah, but until the margin gets to 30, those games are so competitive, and I'm really into it. That's just true. Like even the ones that basically. There have been several games that have been over at halftime, and I've still just enjoyed the first half because the intensity is still there. And I don't know, man, like maybe the like dark downside of all this is like the regular season kind of sucks sometimes, just comparatively. It's just not close to what we've gotten so far.
It's too long at this point, and you hate to diminish the regular season. But
if you had to bet, like, will there ever be fewer than 82 games, like in a normal NBA season?
I honestly don't. I think it really depends, unless there's like a shift in how the product is actually disseminated. I don't know if these streaming services getting involved in the rights change things, but there are two things that stand out to me is just gate revenue and then being able to market this to your TV partners.
Yeah.
And then also just for historical context to where it's, okay, well, LeBron James is just going to be the all-time leading scorer forever and ever and ever because no one's ever, did we shorten it to... So I don't know how you reconcile that. And we don't necessarily need, like, in theory, people could say, well, we don't need those honors. Like that shit matters. Like that was really cool when LeBron passed Kareem. Like that was cool.
Yeah. I guess the other thing is there's no guarantee that if there were 55 or 60 games or whatever, that the regular season would be taken any more seriously. Like
that would still miss 18.
Yeah. I mean, we just assume that, so everybody's super fresh all the time because now there's 3 days off between every game or whatever, but you never know. Like it just might be the same devaluation. This has been a solid 4 minutes of just completely off topic discussion.
Should we start with the end of Cavs Celtics and specifically start with the, Cleveland Cavaliers? Time to get into their exit. They're dropped. I want to get all your thoughts on it. You could, whatever I don't summarize that I miss, you'll have to hit. There was that what's become a trademark hit piece coming out from The Athletic like 2 seconds after the game ends. I do find it funny that people are shocked by this, and it's, well, the writing's on the wall. They're down 3-1, and like that's how this shit works. Like people sit Like I just find it the novel like, oh my God, I can't believe they did this. And it's like, that's kind of how this stuff has always worked. But
Fill people in on what you're referring to, like as far as what is in this thing.
I'll say the one thing that we probably could have just known sooner, and I know it was like kind of known, but I thought like Evan Mobley didn't want to go to the Cavs in the draft. It's like, all right, thanks for telling us that in the year 2024 when he was part of the 2022 draft class.
Right, he's 3 years into his career
now. Oh yeah, was he the 2021 draft class?
I think this was his third year.
Third,
right?
Yeah. You're right. So it was third year. That took 3 years for that to come out. So the big things are the Jared Allen rib injury, where the language of pierce the rib is like, okay, did he have a cracked rib? But whatever. Yeah. He suffers that in the Magic series. And then the Cavs continue to list him as questionable. And after reading this report, I kind of feel like, I don't know, that it was fucked up to list him as questionable, where it was like they were pressuring him, because it seems like players were apparently, or the team was upset that he wouldn't get a cortisol injection to try and play, which you should absolutely not be upset about, because you know what would have happened? You would have lost anyway. My whole thing is that was just awkward. And then continuing to list him as questionable, I guess holding out hope, because if he's dealing with a cracked rib or something, that's not just like, oh, like we don't know if he's going to be out. So that was weird. There was, of course, the Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland stuff. It was more optimistic about Donovan Mitchell staying and signing what could be a 4-year, like $205 million extension, basically. However, it doesn't seem like he likes JB Bickerstaff. The organization kind of threw him under the bus in that, or didn't throw him under the bus, but said that they're going to evaluate their options. Mitchell and other players weren't happy with his practice style, with his defensive schemes. There was that element. I think the real bombshell kind of hidden in here, though, was that Darius Garland might request a trade if Donovan Mitchell signs an extension, which is just like, wow. Like, that's not really, like, he has a ton of time left on his deal. And I know he had a rough season. He dealt with injuries, and there was apparently some off-court stuff that he was dealing with behind the scenes. So you're almost in a situation where we've talked a lot about, well, can this work with two bigs? And we've talked about the two guards, but it seems like the Cavs are almost being forced in to this ultimatum if Darius Garland and Clutch are going to consider asking for a trade if Donovan Mitchell signs an extension. I think that was just the crux of everything, is that there could be a new coach. The fact that, what I will say about the Jared Allen stuff, and that's where I'll throw it to you, is maybe we start there. He's being traded, right? You don't let that stuff out there, sources from within the organization, if you're planning on keeping this dude, do you?
Man, there's so much in this that, like, I feel like if you have an opinion on what's going to happen, you read 3 more paragraphs and you get sources saying things that make you reverse it. Like, start with Allen. Like, yeah, it does seem, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's any more or less likely than it would have been just when we spoke about this last time, of like, the fit's not great and which duo is more likely to be split up. And there's good arguments on both sides. Speaking about the Mobley Allen duo versus the Mitchell Garland duo. But like, you wouldn't think that, basically, we're paraphrasing, but like the idea that teammates were annoyed, or some variation of that word, that he didn't get an injection to fight the pain and play through this rib injury, that's, if you're Allen, you've got to be thinking like, okay, so these guys don't like me very much, maybe it's also like Allen. That doesn't seem like, if it were a one-off thing, that teammates would be annoyed. So maybe Allen has like malingered in the past, or not played when other guys have thought that. That's something we don't know. But like, start with Bickerstaff, where the piece starts really with like, he gets, dressed down by Kobe Altman in like December over playing Donovan Mitchell 45 minutes. And then you get down a little farther and it's like, well, but the team made a huge push for his coach of the year candidacy later because he did so well when 2 of the 4 cornerstone guys were out. And so it's like, okay, which is it? Like, how does it benefit you, Cleveland Cavaliers, to have a coach of the year that you intend to move on from? It's just like, it's a weird, so just to say, there's so much in here about the Garland Mitchell stuff, the Allen teammate stuff, the Bickerstaff things going both ways, like even some Mobley stuff. Like, I guess the way I would kind of, if you had to have like a takeaway from this, it's probably that one way or the other now we should view the Cavs team as we currently know it as like a short time operation, which maybe that's all it was ever going to be once they brought Mitchell in, just because of the contractual status that he had, coming in. Like, it was going to be a good time, not a long time situation. But now it's just like, I think reading all this, doesn't it seem like you definitely just move Mitchell if he won't sign an extension this summer? Like, you don't wait till the deadline, you just do it. And then whatever the rest of the fallout is, if that means you're going to move Allen and go with Garland and Mobley together as your two, core pieces going forward, like, it just sort of moves the timeline up where clearly there's enough unrest, there's enough infighting, there's enough, like, the vibes are bad. We love to like focus on the real, analytical terms. So you should probably just view this summer as like, let's orient ourselves to go forward, whether that's with Mitchell or without, and then move down the decision chain from there.
So I feel like not that I disagree. If Mitchell's not going to sign an extension, then you have to at least entertain the trade offers. I don't know if you need to absolutely make it before the deadline, because how much less are you going to get from the Nets if you're trading him? If like whatever team is trading for him knows they're going to keep him, so you could punt it until the trade deadline to try and give one last push. And that's kind of like, that's what's fascinating here to me, is that I know Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, in part because they played less together, like it just didn't feel like they were on anywhere near the same wavelength a lot of the times. I can't shake this feeling that like I want to see them float it a little bit more. And you look at, I know Max Strus and George Niang didn't shoot well when it got to the conference semis, but like those are two players that helped you open up the floor. Max Strus was running pick and rolls by the end of that conference final series with Marcus Morris and Tristan Thompson on the court. Talk about a mind fuck.
Did Marcus Morris like extend his career by 2 more years and he locked himself into like $12 more million for his career?
Someone's absolutely going to give him more than the minimum this summer and then point to just game 5 against the Celtics is why that's happening. So, but what's interesting is like they're not, because Mitchell still has another year left on his deal, because Garland's only on his first contract, because Allen's on a bargain contract, because Mobley's only going to be signing an extension, so he has another year of his rookie scale left. They're not uber expensive yet. It's like they can just have the full mid-level exception this year.
Yeah.
And so you have the ability now, Karis LeVert's under contract, like you can tack on another player who, I don't know what the mid-level is going to yield when you look at this free agency class specifically. You do have Isaac Okoro entering restricted free agency, so that could factor into your salary commitments. But you do have the ability. You also open up a first-round pick to trade this summer. You do have the ability to land someone who's maybe in the top 5, 6, 7 of your rotation. Probably not the top 5, because what they still need is what they've always needed, is that they have some of these solutions, but they're all sort of imperfect. And just because we didn't see enough of them this year, I would almost hate to end in them having to make this decision of, well, we're going to break up both the small guards and the bigs. If they think they're at that point, I kind of get it. You can only kind of latch onto this for so long and say, well, we weren't healthy enough, we'll be healthier next year. I'd be curious, though, if there's less urge. I mean, I'm not even curious, because there's clearly not. That piece doesn't drop unless there's just smoke and fire. So I guess I didn't realize externally just how much internal urgency there was. Everyone talked about all year about, or within the Cleveland market, like, oh no, don't rush this. Like this whole talking point, it's unfair. And clearly, like, the Cavs were just laser focused on it anyway.
What's kind of wild and makes this trickier to parse out, I want to get back to like why I feel like there's a little more urgency maybe than you do, though. I take your point that like you got him on Mitchell under contract for a full extra year, like you can wait. But this report has 3 guys with bylines on it, which one explains how there's so many different sources being cited here, but that makes it really hard to, like, if it's one person, and a lot of times if it's a specific person, you can make a really educated guess as to like where this is coming from,
right,
and who it benefits, like who wanted this information out there. It's 3 different reporters, and there's clearly like, well, that's from Garland's representation, that's from the Cavs themselves, like staffers, and that's from Mitchell, that's from Mobley, that's from Bickers. Like it makes it look like there's smoke everywhere, but it also makes you realize like this isn't just motivated by like one player, one figure within the organization that wants a message out there. There's like a lot of little fires, it feels like, that everybody wants to air out,
And one of them, and I don't know if it doesn't seem like he was among those who were frustrated in the piece, but like some of that was playing out on the court, where Evan Mobley had, specifically to close the series, just was fantastic. And it was while he was playing center. And there's also, I think there might've been something in the piece about, I don't know if there was frustration, but he's not been given the runway to develop the way someone in his position normally would because the Cavs are on this immediate timeline. And so like the real curveball for me was the Darius Garland stuff because I think, I don't know if we differed on this, but I was more concerned about this two big model if you ever really wanted to optimize Evan Mobley than I was about the two guard model. But now it seems like it might be coming to a head where, okay, well, we know that the best version of Mobley on offense is this. And there is that redundancy then in terms of the space occupied or the spots that he's trying to get to with Jared Allen. But then there's also, I don't know if there is some redundancy, but it's not like these two can't work together, but it seems like they don't want to, or at least Darius Garland's not about it.
I mean, and then if that's the case, then, okay, we know sort of what we have to do moving forward because these are two guys that just aren't going to want to try, right? Like to make this work. The reason to get back to, because I think this is the most interesting thing, like just generally, is when a team is not long for its current iteration, which I think, however long that timeline is for the Cavs, like I think we agree that like change is coming, like big, small.
If I set the over under at 1.5 of JB Bickerstaff and the core four being gone, are you taking the over or the under on that?
I'm taking by when? Like
by
this
next
season?
Yeah.
I take the over, I think. There's too much in here about Bickerstaff from too many different sides. So like there's your one.
And maybe we should compartmentalize this a little bit because it is all over the place. Can we just, and this is more of a quickly, the JB Bickerstaff stuff, I don't know that he's done, I will say this, I don't think he's done a job that's poor enough or concerning enough to get fired. I don't know if he has done enough to keep his job when you are at this level. And now you're getting to a point where unless you're going to trade some of these core players, the only change you could make is the coach. And there's probably something to the reality. It's not even the concept, the reality that he was a better coach when they were shorthanded. And so if you're going to bring in a new coach, I almost wonder, like, well, then do you want to give this a shot with the four guys again? Because is there someone who could better integrate them all together? And again, that seems blasphemous to say just because some of the functional redundancies aren't going to go away unless Evan Mobley turns. He did take did you see towards the end of Cavs Celtics, he took that step back three from the corner. Unless that's going to just become a regular shot in his arsenal, there's always going to be the redundancies, but do you trust that someone else is going to come in and optimize these guys better? And if you're going to break up, if you're trading one or two of these guys anyway, how much of an upgrade are you going to get from JB Bickerstaff? I mean, I guess you could. I'm not saying, but so just where do you land on the Bickerstaff stuff?
That's a concern mentioned in the article. Is Cleveland is like not real sure that there is an established coach out there, and they may not want to hire an up and comer to that position. I think what we can say now, I feel like whether it's fair or not to move on from Bickerstaff, like has he done enough, or and then you can get into all the complicating factors you mentioned, like, well, the roster is kind of unwieldy. He did well when it made more sense when two guys were out, and
I said shorthanded. You phrased it better. JB Bickerstaff was better at his job when the roster made more sense.
Right. And so like, but then it's okay, small samples and okay, like whatever. I don't think we need to worry anymore or factor in anymore. Like, should he or should he not, based on like get fired, based on what happened this year? The reports about the players and the executives, like, not being happy with him.
Yeah, he's gone.
So that fair isn't a factor. Like fair's got nothing to do with it.
Our opinion actually doesn't matter because he's gone. That's
I mean, like there are clear opinions within the Cavs, like multiple, they're citing players complaining about this, that, and the other, like their practice, their preparation, their defense, that like you could go down, like there's probably a dozen things that you could isolate that are complained about as shortcomings of Bickerstaff.
And the Donovan Mitchell one's the biggest if he's not on the same page with him.
And so if you're trying to get over under 1.5, like if the Cavs go to Mitchell and say, okay, here's the 4 for 208, and he's like, I will sign it, but I don't like the coach, Bickerstaff, like the phone is picked up and he's called that second. So that's one way it's out. Like if it's Mitchell or Bickerstaff, it's obviously going to be Mitchell who stays, but it may just be neither. So like, even if Mitchell goes, he says, I'm not signing it. They work to trade him. It's like, well, there were enough complaints about Bickerstaff throughout the rest of that article that it wasn't just Mitchell. So maybe that's how you get to 2. and you see what it looks like with Garland and the two bigs. I don't know. Like Allen, you started this by saying like Allen's getting traded now. He's still by far the easiest piece to move. And just because of the salary and because there's enough teams that would start him that you could get something back.
What gets interesting with that is, we very rarely see these big, and they still need the wing. Like that's still what they kind of need. And we very rarely see these big for small trades, let alone big for wing trades. And so you need to find the team that needs what he does. And there are teams that need it, but who's also willing to send back players that you need, unless you're going to go the draft pick and prospect route, which would be curious if you are planning on extending Donovan Mitchell. And then if part of me is just so they're in such a fascinating position because no matter what they do, no matter how many guys leave, like they're not a team that's like kind of pulling back. They've traded picks away. They have a bunch of they're going to have 2 stars on their roster next year, regardless of at least 2, regardless of what ends up happening. And so, or star caliber players, if wherever you land on Mobley, Allen, I get even, Garland didn't have the cleanest season. So I just like there are teams that be interested in Darius Garland, but like, let's use I look at the Spurs as a team or the Magic. And it's, well, who do you want? Like, who do you want that you could actually get from those rosters that makes sense for your roster? And just for there are other teams that could be in the mix, but like those are the 2 that seem to make the most sense as, they need Garland and are in a position where he's young enough, he's on a contract, you give up enough to get him. But those are 2 teams that are, unless you really love Anthony Black or Jet Howard, like you're not getting Devin Vassell for Darius Garland. That's just absolutely not happening. So you're taking back all these pick-based packages, and that to me is honestly, I was about to say it's less palatable than if it's a Donovan Mitchell situation because he's kind of the backbone of the team right now, and so it is a little bit more palatable if you go that route because Mitchell wants out. But even then, you still have Garland and Mobley and maybe Allen, and so you don't necessarily want just these future-driven packages.
Yeah, I mean it's weird because those core guys are still young enough. Certainly Mobley, where it's like, if you had to move Mitchell and you recouped like a bunch of the picks you gave up, or not a bunch, but some portion of the picks you gave up to get him, you're kind of like, you're still young. You still got Mobley and Garland as like cornerstones. You've got more flexibility now. You probably go hire a new younger coach and you take like a little bit of a step back. You kind of just reset to where you were before the Mitchell trade, like minus a pick or 2.
Well,
and a coach.
This gets mentioned with Mikal Bridges a lot, but would you trade Darius Garland back to Utah for some of your own picks back if that was like
oh my god? I mean, would Utah I feel like is in the Keontae George business. I don't know. Well, okay, maybe this is another way to look at it. Would you say Bickerstaff is the most likely person to be gone, or is
he's the easiest to change? And I was actually I do think for the most part, I would call him risk averse when it comes to like, he's going to be for most of the season, felt like he was going to be at full strength, more diplomatic with how he was running his rotations. But he did get to a point by the end of the year where he was just trying shit. Where it was, both bigs are healthy. Well, guess what? Only one of you are going to close anyway. So I would love, I want to see this entire core healthy together one more time because I really think that there could still be something here. But I would like to see him, like if another coach comes in and they decide to just lean into the one big 4-out model, maybe they don't have 2 small guards anymore. Was JB Bickerstaff really the problem? And there's a host of problems, but I agree with you that I think he's not even the most likely. I would be shocked if he's back.
And then probably Mitchell is the next most likely after that. Or maybe Allen.
I was going to ask you about that though, because based off what came out in the Allen piece, and then it seems like Mitchell, because we have Dan Gilbert on record saying he thinks Mitchell is going to sign an extension. And then within the piece, it said that people around the league expect him to sign the extension. And so I'm wondering if this is a case of a little bit of duality where was he not humbled, but his mindset changed a little bit after these injuries? So now he's dealing with all these lower body injuries he played through them in the postseason, but obviously wasn't able to finish the playoffs. And then he can also just look at it and say, like, I'll just figure out how to get where I want to go or somewhere else in a year or 2.
That's it. Like, I was going to say cynic, but like, that's kind of the realistic take of just like, get the money on the books for Mitchell. And then if you want to leave, it's like, you will not be the first person to sign a big contract and then try to get moved. That's just like, probably just from a cold analytical standpoint for him, like that's the smartest thing to do. Just get the money. And then you can figure out a way to get where you want to be.
To be clear, because I know people will misconstrue what we both said, we're not rooting for this to happen.
No,
it's just the reality of the situation. I've said and we both basically said and agreed. I was rooting for this to work because I don't want to see these. I love it when these teams come not out of nowhere, but they're not on a player's list
Yeah.
and they go out and get them anyway. I like teams being that aggressive, but I also don't want to see them turn into these 1 or 2 year layovers for these stars where you look at what happened with, and it's at every scale. Kawhi goes to Toronto and wins a championship, leaves after a year. Paul George, they got 2 years out of him at OKC. And yes, they get another contract, but he finds a way to get moved later. We could be seeing the same thing happening with Donovan Mitchell. So like, we're not rooting for this, but this is the reality of the situation.
Yeah, yeah. And no, I agree. Like, it's funny when we talk about, oh, we like parity, in terms of like which teams are contending and not. I think the parity that might be more important is what you're talking about, where it's like, in theory, any team, regardless of market size, as long as they're well managed and have the assets, can just go get someone and it won't necessarily be a rental. Like, it's probably naive to think that that's going to be the status quo just because LA is still LA and like Houston and Miami. And there are just certain places players want to live for a number of reasons and organizations they want to play for. But yeah, I think it would be a shame in a lot of ways if this turns out to be like it's a stopover for Mitchell, which is like really what it seemed like up front. Cause like the second the trade was reported, it was all just like the New York Knicks thing was like in the third paragraph of the report of the trade, right? Like that's just never gone away. But yeah, no, I think maybe let's say the other end of it, like Mobley is going nowhere. Like there's no scenario where Mobley is traded, right?
No, I would be shocked.
That's the safest one. And then after that, I guess it's Garland.
Honestly, I wonder if it's Mitchell.
Well, it would be nice for the Cavs if it was Mitchell.
Just because, like, maybe I'm like not latching on to the idea enough that he's not going to sign the extension, but it just seems like we've now gotten too many signs that he's going to put pen to paper on the extension. And if he's going to do that, that just removes him from the equation. I find myself I think it might be Jared Allen might be the most likely player to be moved, just because I think like the idea of like, okay, so if Mitchell extends, you don't have to move Garland just because he has all these years left on his contract. So you don't necessarily have to move him. And he doesn't have the clout yet to be like to agitate for out with so many guaranteed years left on his deal.
And if Mitchell extends, you're probably changing the coach, and the new coach can come in and pitch the idea of like, we're going to do things differently. And then you might get more buy-in from both Garland and Mitchell's sides of like, okay, we'll try it. Like we all agree that whatever Bickerstaff was doing, we didn't like it. So let's try this new approach and see. Like it may just buy you more time. But yeah, I just it sucks that like these are the things we're talking about now, as opposed to like how do the Cavs take the next step next year? Because they did advance farther than they did the year before, despite like a bunch of obviously like hindrances that we knew because the core played like 20 something games together, and that we didn't know, which is that nobody likes the coach and apparently nobody likes anybody else on the roster, it seems like. But that's how these things go. I think sometimes when you have the expectations that came with the Mitchell acquisition, and they're actually, how about this? Like, have the Cavs met or fallen really short of or exceeded expectations based on when they traded for Mitchell?
I would say I don't know if they've exceeded, but I think they've met. I mean, especially when you contextualize it against the injuries they dealt with this year, the fact that I know it wasn't the cleanest win against the Magic, but you still didn't have one of your 4 best players to close that series. And like, you are still like we kind of forget because, and I mean, I'm guilty of this too, because I picked him to win defensive player of the year and I had him as my defensive player of the year last year. Evan Mobley's still so young and hasn't been in an environment that's necessarily conducive to him growing offensively. They won a playoff series.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then you run into a buzzsaw that is the Celtics while missing 2 of your 4 best players over the course of the final 2 games. So if I had told you when they made the trade that they would win 1 playoff series over the next 2 years, would you have called that a failure? And is it more rooted in, well, look at how much they gave up to get him? Because it's almost polar opposite ends of the spectrum where it's okay, there's the cost for Donovan Mitchell, but then you look at the roster and it's not that they're not good, but it's like some of these guys could still need time. Like Garland is fairly young. Well, Mobley's super young.
Yeah, it's hard. Like when you frame it that way as 1 playoff series in 2 years, my gut reaction is like, oh, that's not enough. But when you look at all the different circumstances, and like, I think we talked about this maybe more in the Minnesota context for the Gobert trade, but like, it doesn't necessarily need to be the case that a big swing has to get you to title contention for certain franchises. Like the Cavs, I think in that same article, the Cavs have not won a postseason series without LeBron since 1993 until
Right.
this one. So it's like the bar is a little bit lower in terms of what constitutes success. I to answer my own question, I would say like this came pretty close to meeting expectations because like you weren't going to beat the Celtics at full strength anyway. So like
Right. That's
this
the
is
other
where the road ended no matter what. It just
right.
that's because you didn't have a 64 whatever 60 something win juggernaut of a roster and you ran into someone that did and that's it. You were not going to succeed there. So like I guess if their seeding had been different, maybe they could have advanced one round farther with some good luck and seen the Celtics in the conference finals. But like I don't know. I guess it does have to look, you have to say like this went about as far as it could have given the roster and its youth and all this other stuff, which feels weird because the sentiment that feels overwhelming is like disappointment, but that just isn't quite right. I don't think.
So I don't even want to get into destinations or something for these players because there's just so many. You could like we could just talk ourselves into 3 of their top 4 players because of that article that came out The Athletic. I wouldn't have necessarily had we might have even had Garland on the list just because you've been concerned about the 2-guard setup. You're running the Cleveland Cavaliers. You're Kobe Altman. What is your game plan this summer? I think you're changing the coach. I was like, are you looking at Kenny Atkinson? Or you're looking at one of these like kind of touted assistants? I don't really know, but like beyond that, what are you doing?
I mean, item 1, I go to Mitchell and I say, are you signing this? Here it is. And if he says yes, I say, do you want a new coach? And if he says yes, I say, okay, we fire Bickerstaff and we look for a new coach. And then after that, I guess you have to field the Darius Garland trade demand because that seems like what's coming based on that report. And you're probably looking for a wing. I wonder if like I keep going
That would
back
be
to
an interesting trade,
Hmm.
but he would have to be on board with it. Darius Garland, and then it's like a opt-in and trade, or I guess the Cavs could probably work it with a sign and trade, but for Paul George.
Paul George is going to come up a lot, I think. I'm going to try to find a way to get him to sign with the Thunder after they like cut a bunch more money.
Hands off. He's the Knicks', which I feel like some people, I know he didn't have the best like close to the playoffs or the best playoff, but Paul George is still really good. I know he's 34, so don't give up everything for him, but Paul George is still good.
Yeah. So the next phase for me is like, I keep coming back to New Orleans because I think I can get, I'm kind of looking at Brandon Ingram and seeing if like, 1 year left on the deal, how much is it really going to take to get him? I don't know how great a fit that is, but at least he gives you someone between the big and the small that can create a shot for you.
But then it just feels like you run into this, don't you run into a little bit like stuff. Not enough 3-point volume from him, and then you are still not, you've kept Evan Mobley at 3rd in the offensive pecking order.
Yeah, well, as good as Mobley has looked, I still am not convinced based on this postseason that he is ever, we can't possibly say that, but like he feels more like a 3rd guy to me offensively and just an A+ defender. No, if he got to be a number 2 option, I think that'd be great. But I'm not like, I don't know, because this goes right into the point of maybe Mobley and his camp being frustrated that like he hasn't been a developmental priority. He's just been like, hey, go in there and help us win immediately. Don't worry about adding to your game type of thing. But you could like, I guess I'm just trying to move Allen or Garland and then coming back with Mitchell, Mobley, new coach, and one of those 2 guys, whoever I, can, having traded whoever I can get the most sensible value for. I don't know specifically, like, yeah, Paul George would be great. Or like, you need a 3 that's like a real 3 that can also do some 4. Like, you know what? I'm giving Marcus Morris $75 million over the next 3 years. Because clearly that is the guy we've been missing.
I wonder if they could get Denny Avdia for Jared Allen. You could probably definitely get him for Darius Garland, and the Wizards have needs at both spots. I don't know if they want a big money point guard, but Darius Garland still, what is he, 24? He's pretty young. So that's like 25. So he's still fairly young. I guess they probably wouldn't be. What's also I'm struggling here is, there are teams, if Mitchell's on the block, we know the Lakers will be involved, and maybe the Heat get involved, the Nets, who I have no idea what the fuck they're doing though, but the Nets will be involved apparently.
Not,
and you're
not tanking. That's all we know.
Right. And you're not going to get Mikal Bridges in that deal either for Donovan Mitchell. I just don't like, for what the Cavs need. I'm almost wondering if like is moving these. I would probably look to see what I could get for Allen before Garland. If Garland requests a trade, that changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't know which team is going to be willing to give up what the Cavs need or what meaningfully optimizes their roster more than the current situation for who they're probably going to be trading.
Yeah. Send Jared Allen to the Warriors for Andrew Wiggins, and you probably need another salary in there. Get your championship caliber small forward right in there.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating offseason for them. Do you have anything else, any other thoughts on them? I think there's going to be some turnover. That was made clear in that.
It's the single most shocking outcome out of all of this is just like if nothing significant changes, right? Like I love the 1 point. I can't get that 1.5 out of my head. That's the perfect over under. Because like if you said, will somebody be gone? Just one, it's like, well, yeah, of course. But two is when you really get into like, oh, this team is like significantly different now.
Because it also seems like there's a non-zero scenario in which 3
right.
could be the answer.
Yeah, easily. One of the bigs, one of the smalls, and the coach. Like that's just done and done. Very realistic. I don't know. Good season though. Like good season, all things considered. It just doesn't feel that way right now.
Yeah, I wish they could have been healthier, but they're going to break it up. And we're not going to. That's just how these windows work in the NBA. Mm-hmm. Everyone is so impatient. So I guess the thing I landed on is like who is the player? Well, let's do it this way. Will they be in Cleveland next season, at the start of next season? JB Bickerstaff.
No.
Jared Allen.
I'll say no.
Evan Mobley.
Yeah.
If you said no, that'd been really funny. Donovan Mitchell.
I'll say, yeah, it really does sound like in that article that if he gets that 4 for 208, he's going to do it. So I'll say yes for him. Feel not great about it.
And then Darius Garland.
Yeah, I guess he's got to be. Well, now I'll be at 3 no's though. I feel like if Mitchell's back, I'll say yes for Garland on my theory of a new coach can pitch. I'll figure out how to make this work.
Doesn't it feel like it's kind of harder? Like, what is harder for them to do to replicate the fear? I know, and he's still not a great finisher at the rim, to replicate what they have offensively in Darius Garland, or to go out and get what they need independent of him.
So we
know what the Cavs need. So it's, I guess, what's the harder task here is I think Garland's going to be worth more on the trade market just because he plays a position of greater emphasis. Mm-hmm. He's 25. He probably has, if we're of him or Allen, I'm not including Mitchell in this. Mitchell probably still has the higher trade value even a year out from free agency. He's the better player. I'm just in terms of trade value. So Garland should have the better value on the market. Maybe I'm wrong just because of the season he's coming off and the max contract that he's on. But if he has the higher trade value, in theory, you should be able to then like get a wing or a wing or two that better optimizes your roster. But then you're also giving up all that Darius Garland can do, the idea of him, the concept of him. So what's harder? Is it to replace, like to figure out how to build your team around his departure? Or is it harder to fill your biggest void with Jared Allen as your primary trade chip?
I think the second one is harder.
Okay.
Just because I don't think Allen's value is quite high enough probably to go get what you need. Although I say that and then it's like, well, look what it costs to get PJ Washington and then like Derek Jones Jr. in Dallas. And like, if you had those two guys on a team with Mitchell and Mobley, like, isn't that like incredible? Like, isn't that like a really dangerous? It seems like, I don't know, maybe it's just because like Luka makes everybody great and allows them to just do what they're good at. But so that's just to say, like, sometimes it isn't that hard to go get the pieces you really need if they're supplementary guys, provided you have a star to like make them the best versions of themselves. Mitchell may or may not be that level of guy. I don't know. Probably not quite. But yeah, like, I guess you could theoretically trade Allen for a couple guys like that just flourish in a new environment. But I think it's harder to imagine it's hard for me to imagine Allen being the principal trade chip and the Cavs getting a guy that makes both of us go, oh shit, like that. Can you believe it? Like that's now their whole.
New Orleans feels like the most popular destination for him.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, well, what do you want? Like Dyson Daniels doesn't
No.
solve
Yeah.
your issues, and you're not getting Trey Murphy or Herb Jones as part of that deal.
Nope.
So it's just like, I thought one of the things I'd given thought to, I was thinking about this a while ago, was would Portland, and there would need to be all sorts of different money involved because Portland's in the tax right now, and Jared Allen doesn't make that much, but like a Jared Allen, and then the package coming back to Cleveland is inevitably Jeremy Grant, like as kind of that type of setup. Would that
Yeah.
be like, is that, oh, are we, maybe you think Jared Allen's the better player? He's definitely the better defender than Jeremy Grant all around right now. But like, is that like, could that be a trade that you have, again, you have to include more salary, which arguably makes it harder on Cleveland's part. I guess if you're not married to George Niang and you have Jeremy Grant coming in, there are permutations that work. But that's like one thing where it's like, oh, that's a team that could justify going big for wing. They're early in the rebuild. Ayton finished the season fine, but Jared Allen's more like, but they also have Robert Williams III sitting there as well, not to mention Duop Reed. So it's like, it's so, things will obviously clarify more as we're into the offseason, but I think I agree with your answer. That's probably harder to get a wing using Jared. Although, at this point, would the Pelicans consider just taking on Jared Allen and sending out? I don't know if you make your team better, by the way, with Brandon Ingram instead of Jared Allen, and there needs to be more money in there. Like maybe that's something they consider with his extension looming. I don't love that fit. Like if you're gonna, I don't love. I guess it'd be different if Garland was going out too. But then you're in a scenario where it's okay. Garland and Allen are both coming out. We need way more than Brandon Ingram coming in. So what other teams are involved here? It's just a talking in circles. I am at this point, but just wildly fascinating situation. That's enough Cavs talk. It was very confusing, but also an interesting exercise, and that's definitely a team to watch over the offseason. Let's go on to the Celtics very, very quickly. I did say I have to walk back, and Rome had called me out of this in the YouTube comments where I said that OKC would beat the Celtics in the finals. It's just very clear that OKC would not, especially after that, game. Obviously, I know they won game 4, but games 4 and 5 against Dallas, the shooting just woof. Do your impressions? Do you have any takeaways for this for Boston after beating the Cavs?
I mean, it's hard to feel like, again, we said this after the first round, like how much did we really learn about Boston that we didn't know, both good and bad? I would say like they've still, had gentlemen sweeps, 2 straight series. They've looked dominant. I mean, the 113-98 for game 5 is like pretty misleading because Cleveland was within, I think it was a single possession game fairly late and, was hanging around until the Celtics almost covered. But the spread was like 15.5, I think, which I cannot remember a spread that big in the second round of the playoffs for a really long time.
It was Craig Porter Jr. being out. That's what
almost got there. They needed that half point. Yeah, I don't know. I guess like I want to say, if it's tempting to say I'm a little less enthusiastic about Boston, winning the title, I guess, because that's I guess we have to talk about winning in the conference finals before that, but it seems unfair just because like, what else do you need them to do if you zoom all the way out there? They're what, 8-2 now in the postseason,
which is, and people are acting like they've failed somehow, right. Which is, and even myself included, maybe I still just don't trust them. The offense is too
that's
sticky.
The thing. It like, I feel like even the TV commentary was on it of just like, there's that stagnation again. There's that specific thing that every time we want to knock Boston or like ask, can they do it? It's always that.
Who is it that was counting like with Mississippi's about them standing in the corner?
It was Kenny Smith on the okay. When you go up at the board. Yeah, no, it's like it's beyond a known thing. And then when it keeps happening, I actually, after we talked last time, I was paying attention to like, okay, how is it because of switching? Is that what it is? Is that why the Celtics bog down and don't move? It's like a little bit, but it's also just, they just can't quit it. They can't get away from it. I don't know what you do. I still keep holding out hope that Porzingis' return, whenever that ends up being, hopefully sooner than later, gives them the ability to like shake out of really long stretches of that kind of play. Just because he's the only guy that gives them an option of, we'll dump it in instead of passing it around the perimeter and work out of that. because they just don't do that with anybody else because the matchup isn't there. It's really hard to find a matchup as tantalizing as 7'3" with a guard switched onto him to keep things kind of simple and get more like into out ball movement than swing, guys stand and dribble.
I'd be with you on that. I think they could still make it out of the East without Kristaps. We said that before. I don't think they would win the title without him.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Bogdan stuff is interesting. And I know sometimes doesn't it sometimes feel like an active choice? That sounds so stupid to say.
That's what I mean. It's not just the switching. It's like they just do it sometimes. I don't understand.
It's so egregious. It tends to be in the fourth quarter or crunch time. I know there's the issue of, I feel like a lot of teams kind of deviate from their core principles when it comes to crunch time. But like the Celtics, I was just looking before, over 22% of their shots come between 7 seconds and 4 seconds left on the shot clock in the fourth quarter. That leads that's the highest rate in the playoffs. And it is miles above the share through the first 3 quarters. And so it's just, what is it about? Is it because they don't have that traditional organizer? And then does it fucking matter when you look at who, like the 4 perimeter players that are like part of your nucleus, and Derek White, Jason Tatum, whatever you think of Jaylen Brown's handle and passing, and then Drew Holiday, that should just be enough. Like,
yeah, it's not like you need the 1989 conventional ball handling point guard. All 4 of those guys are like, it's a different term, but it kind of accomplishes the same thing. They're advantage creators, where if you set a screen, every one of them can either come off it and pull up and shoot, or go around it and get into the paint and do a thing next, whatever that thing is, like shoot a floater, kick it out, like whatever. They all can do that. So it's not like it. To me, the idea that it's a personnel issue is like that doesn't pass the smell test. To your point, it's just like, it does seem like when situations get pressurized for whatever reason, they just go away from creating advantages in ways that they could. And I just like, maybe this is just never going to stop. Maybe this is just part of their whole deal, and they overcome it or they don't.
To be fair, it probably looks worse too when there's variability in their 3-point clip. Like, they're a dangerous 3-point shooting team. I don't have a problem with the amount of threes they take at all. I know some people do. But like when those aren't falling, I think it just exacerbates kind of everything else that's inherently flawed about the team. But they're not quite a no-note squad. I'm not super confident in them winning the title. I am pretty confident in them coming out of the East. Mm-hmm. And so I was going to ask you, it's a great way to, one, segue to the next part of this, but also to put a bow on the Celtics. Who would you rather face in the conference finals, Indy or New York?
If I'm the Celtics, I think I'd still rather see the Pacers. I just, for a number of reasons. Do you have a different answer? I mean,
I'm sure you heard Chris Haynes was reporting that the Knicks are hoping OG could be back for the conference finals. And so just the prospect of having to face him I know Jalen Brunson's tough to guard. Like, everyone is so injured. Just if you told me OG Anunoby was out for the season, which I don't want to happen if the Knicks advance, I might pick the Knicks, but then there's just something like, I don't know, like that team is just, I mean, like Josh Hart gets to play under 40 minutes one night and he comes back and looks fresh as hell, like the next game. So those are forces with which you do not want to have to reckon. So I think the answer is probably the Pacers too.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't want to sit here and knock the Pacers, but there's guys you can go at. If you want to pick on Halliburton, you can do that. The Knicks the Knicks are getting like a little bit of a heat thing where it's like, I don't know, man, I just don't want to see them. Like, I know they don't have what it seems like it should take to continue to play this well, but it keeps happening. And so like, there's some weird, some magic voodoo, I don't know, that's like, I'm just not interested in facing that. If I can face a normal team with like normal flaws that actually matter and show up in the ways you think that they should, I will take that, even if they're healthier, which is obviously true of the Pacers and virtually every other team on planet Earth compared to the Knicks.
Let's do one thing that we'll be watching for each team in the upcoming game 6s. And we'll begin with the Knicks Pacers. What are you kind of tracking?
I mean, the main thing starts with how's Brunson moving. And related to that is how effectively can the Pacers get the ball out of his hands? Because I know they really tried that in the last game and it didn't work. They doubled him. I think the stat was 28 times. That's the most of any game they played in this series. And then like the third down the list is like, is Deuce McBride going to be like the game breaking lineup change that he was against that specific type of coverage? So it's like that interplay of how does Brunson look? How do the Pacers try to keep him from dominating the game? And then do the Knicks have the right guys on the floor playing well enough to capitalize on that? I'm through the, I'm past the like, oh, are the Knicks going to get tired? Because it did sort of happen in one game, but like, that's it. They've had enough time. They haven't a big enough layoff between games 5 and 6 to give me confidence that like, okay, they're as fresh as they're going to be. So it's really just the Brunson interplay and like the knock-on effects of what Indiana does with him.
Brunson looked like he was moving quite well in game 5, which is a big deal. It felt like his movements just on ball and off ball were both sharper. I think what I'm watching for at this game is what level of involvement do we get from Tyrese Haliburton, where it's he had those you call it a lamentable game 1, has 3 like really solid or great performances, and then has the game 5 where Caitlin Cooper had the stat that the Pacers set fewer ball screens for Tyrese Haliburton in game 5 than he was targeted with ball screens at the other end. And so one, how much is he going to be targeted on deep? The Knicks are just going to
all the time
at that. Yeah, they're going to hunt him. And what are your ways around that? So I'm curious to see really what Tyrese Haliburton looks like at both ends of the court, I guess, because I'm not saying I will never say this. You want Tyrese Haliburton on the floor, but if he's not going to give you offensive volume, then he's not going to make that up on the defensive end. It puts you in just this weird situation. The 2 other things that I'd be watching, the Pacers being able to stop the Knicks on the offensive glass. They did that at points this series. They did not do that in game 5. And that's really critical because like, you don't want a chance for the Knicks to get their deep, forget about like, okay, the Knicks are getting these opportunities, but they took, actually don't worry about it. They took almost 30 more shots than the Pacers did. And get like, that's how if you think you're out talented, that's how you win games, is by taking 30 more shots.
It's really hard to lose a game when you get 30 more shots and when you get offensive rebounds on almost half of your own misses. Like really, like the Pacers are not quite like, nobody's ever really truly drawing dead, but like it's really close to drawing dead if either of those 2 things happens again.
And I mean, like the way the Pacers play on offense, you can throw 2 bodies on Isaiah Hartenstein and then still just like, well, whoever has the ball, like get it to whoever can run up, like, and you don't have to compromise speed. But the thing, they did that at points, but then it felt like you would have a Dante DiVincenzo or Josh Hart come flying in. It's like those guys need to be tagged. And it's not, maybe they don't have the personnel to do it, but it also just feels like Isaiah Hartenstein is like this one dude and he's great. He's like out rebounding your entire team. So I would probably throw 2 bodies on him more. I don't know how you feel about that. But the other thing I was going to say is why it's really critical to do that is the Knicks defense has been so bad against the Pacers when it hasn't been allowed to get set this series. The Knicks are allowing, after a missed shot on their end, they're allowing 1.35 points per possession. That is a lot. It's the worst mark of the second round. And if after they're committing a turnover, it's 1.41, which is I think the second or third worst mark. You compare that to, though, after the Knicks make a shot, they're allowing just 1.07 points per possession. And so, yeah, that's middle of the ground. If you care about conference semifinals rankings, that's a huge fucking difference. When you go from 1.07 to 1.35. And it's a difference between a below average offense and then like the best offense in NBA history if you're the Pacers.
I think because that is such a pivotal like swing factor in the series, the way that the Knicks have weaponized their offensive rebounding is so critical, because like at some point, and it should happen in this next game, the Pacers have to evaluate like, we can't like leak out. We can't put a huge emphasis on like getting out in transition, because we just can't afford to give up 30 extra possessions because we're not on the offensive boards. Like it's the age old thing. And we talked about it a little bit, but like usually you have to choose, like, are you going to defensive rebound or are you going to run? And it's like, if the Knicks are not any good at, I mean, it's all related, right? Like the Knicks are probably shitty in transition defense because they don't get back because they're on the offensive boards, and the Pacers are bad on the defensive boards because they're leaking out. And it's just like, the Knicks have the upper hand in that like dynamic right now, just because if you're the Pacers, the one way you cannot lose is the same way you just lost. And so like you can't let the offensive rebounding get so out of hand again. And maybe that keeps him off the break a little bit. And maybe that diminishes Halliburton's value too, because he's so good in the open floor. And so like the Knicks are using this one thing that they're great at to kind of like take the Pacers out of several things that they would like to do in the series. And so like, I don't know if you wanted to point to one thing, like if I said like, what's the one stat you'd like to know? And then you have to guess who's going to win the game. It's just like, I don't know if the Knicks have 8 to 10 more offensive rebounds than the Pacers do. I don't see how the Knicks lose. Like that just feels like the way it goes. Or if the Pacers have X number of transition points, like then, well, okay, well, that's going to tell me a lot. I think it's one of those two things to me.
Yeah. So the Knicks had in game 5, I was double checking it because you said 50%. They're 49.1% offensive rebounding rate. That's gnarly.
Every other time you miss, you're getting it back. Like you can't lose. I keep saying this, but like you can't lose a game when you're getting half of your own misses back because those keep turning into threes, right? Like that's or putbacks. It's just like, and the Pacers are not a good defensive team anyway, and so you're just making them play defense for another 14 seconds sometimes. Like that's just I can't remember the last team that turned offensive rebounding into this like killer. We can solve anybody by just going to the glass.
I do. So I was going to be curious. Do you think that this is a situation where I guess you can't necessarily sit here and say, I don't have a problem with like what anything Aaron Nesmith did. Like you probably need more from him offensively. Mm-hmm. And I know Brunson fared better against him defensively in game 5, but like that's your answer there, because I feel like this kind of leaks into the question of what Tyrese Halliburton's level of involvement is on the offensive end. Do you have to consider playing like a TJ McConnell or an Andrew Nembhard less just because those are two guys that probably need the ball? And like TJ McConnell off the ball on offense makes the Knicks' life a lot easier on defense.
So easy. Yeah.
And so it's like, is that something you look at?
I mean, you sort of have to. Well, it kind of depends. I guess you may need to feel it out, like in the game, like what do we need right now? Based on how the Knicks are guarding you. But like, again, I keep marveling at how much of a playoff difference McConnell has made just broadly because of what you're talking about. It's like you almost never at this stage of the playoffs are able to get away with someone that you don't need to guard off the ball. Like it just defenses are too good and like too predatory to let that work. But yeah, maybe that's something to look at. I think on the other end though, like if you're going to go with McBride again, which if I was wrong, that Precious Achiuwa needed to play more. And maybe it was like, as we said, after a little bit, like Jericho Sims needs to play less, but the McBride piece of it, that's something that specifically with Siakam, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, like you got to find a way to get Siakam in like an advantage position against one of the Knicks 4 guys that are like 6'4" and under. Like that has to just be something you do. And, that's a slow it down tactic, I guess, in a lot of ways that you have to be pretty deliberate in creating the switch or whatever and getting Siakam, on the guy you want. And the Pacers kind of like to play a little more freely and keep the ball moving. But like you got, if you need a bucket after like a kind of scary couple of stretches against the Knicks, like you could do a lot worse than just finding a mismatch for Siakam and letting him try to score or get fouled in the mid post, right? Like I think that's a pretty viable way to go if you can't find anything else to get going and you're facing elimination now, so you might as well try it. I
do think that he deserves McBride. I mean, Alec Burks coming in too.
Yeah,
deserves a shout out for just not really playing for the Knicks. I think he was dealing with some shoulder stuff, but then just comes in and is ready. And I had trolled. I was like, if you like need to lean on Alec Burks, you might just be done. But him and Deuce McBride really stepping up and coming up big for like, because Deuce McBride gives them just a level of intensity on the defensive end too, where it's not always going to come through, but like he's a body that you can move around. Like that's another option that you could throw at realistically Tyrese Halliburton. And so that's big time. And I was curious as to what that, lineup did against the Pacers in that last game. I'm trying to figure out what they finished as that Deuce McBride like version of the starting 5. I can't find it. I thought I had it written down somewhere. They were
like Deuce was a plus 26 in his 40 minutes or in his, of course, 40 minutes.
They were only that lineup though with Hartenstein, Hart, Brunson, DiVincenzo, and McBride was actually only a plus 5. I thought it would have been higher. The one though you sub out, so McBride. If you sub out, I'll frame it this way: put in Burks for Dante DiVincenzo, and that lineup was a plus 12. against the Pacers in that past
Alec
game. So
Burks, we knew all along, was the key to
yeah.
success.
So shout out Alec Burks and Deuce McBride. Thunder Mavs. Woof. What are you
Man,
looking for? What are you watching for in game 6?
I mean, there's so many things. I think like, how are the Thunder going to, one, get to the foul line again? 10 free throws in game 5, not enough. And two, relatedly, like, find ways to make it so that your offense is not just SGA, like hunting for tough twos. Like, that kind of worked down the stretch of game 4, but you can't, that's no way to live. As great as SGA is, like, there just has to be a way, whether it's targeting, you can't really target Kyrie anymore, it seems like, because Irving has played really good individual defense, but it's got to just be more of going at Luka, more of trying to find ways to get some layups, get some threes that are not shot by Lou Dort after like 2 flybys. It just felt like every three, this is obviously anecdotal, but in game 5, the ball kept finding Dort. And this is obviously by design by Dallas. It has played phenomenal defense, held the Thunder to the lowest point total they've had all year, playoffs or regular season. And it was legit. Like, the ball can't just keep ending up with Dort for bailout threes. Like, that is a massively successful defensive possession if that is the result. So you'd say find ways to get more spacing, more shooting. Well, the Thunder started Isaiah Joe. So like, and they still scored 92 points. I mean, like, it's got to be, how do the Thunder score? And whether that's picking on matchups, whether that's finding ways to get better spacing, whether that's, it's like, I don't know, running, I guess, trying to run more. But like, that's just got to be where you're focused on as OKC, because the Mavs have, like, I don't know, man, this defense, the more we see, the more legit it seems. Like, I said this after like probably each of their wins in the series, like, I don't think this is fake. I don't think we're going to go into next year wondering if the Mavs late season defensive surge was legit. Like, it just is. Jones and Washington, like, those guys are, I mean, Jones has kind of done this in Miami during his best stretches a couple years ago, but PJ Washington is just like an objectively like valuable defensive piece that is, I don't know. The Thunder have got to find a way to score. That's my long-winded circling 3 times around the point answer. Do you think it's something different?
Well, so one, this series has been like kind of a slugfest where both of these teams have the bottom 2, or I should say, frame it as both the defenses have they're the top 2 half-court defenses of the second round. The Thunder do lead the second round in the frequency with which they're getting out in transition. They probably still could stand or need to figure out a way to ratchet that up because they've struggled so much in the half court against Dallas. They can't, you're watching this, and I know it's a little bit, the spacing is different when let's Isaiah Joe as an example on the court, or Case and Wallace. The Mavericks are treating it though as like they still don't care that they're not, it makes it harder when Josh Giddey's not there if you want to kind of frame some of these defensive matchups, but you know, like OKC was missing a lot of higher quality looks, it felt like, in game 5. And then you go back and they still shot, I think 36 over the past 2 games when they've shot so terribly from 3. They're at like 37% on wide open threes. I expected that number to be lower. That's not a high number relative to wide open threes. I just expected it to be a lot lower. But like, they're not putting the Mavericks in rotation in the half court. And that's a testament to the Mavericks. But could you argue that, well, maybe something will eventually give and Dallas will have to start being more frenzied with their rotation because OKC starts hitting shots, but you need someone outside of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to consistently either one hit. Well, I mean, he's not going to be the one hitting outside shots, but you need someone to consistently hit outside shots. Or you need someone who's going to put enough pressure consistently on Dallas in the half court to put them in rotation. And that's the question I'm going to have for you is, I think he's played well defensively, but like, what is going on with J-Dub here?
Yeah.
Because if he's the guy where we entertained and this is, I want to make it clear because this dovetails with some Rudy Gobert discourse that we've seen. The regular season is the regular season. So nothing that's happening in the playoffs changes anything that Jalen Williams accomplished in the regular season. He was Grant's most improved player, I think. He deserved to be. But like, this has not been the best playoff debut for him. And I think he definitely, to me, it's at least made clear, like, okay, like there still needs to be some counters for him on the offensive. But like, what is going on with him in your eyes? Or what do you think he needs to add or is not bringing?
Yeah, I would echo, first of all, that like, because I had this thought watching game 5 and just, it's like, again, he just can't get going. like, it will not change my outlook on him going into next year. I was like trying to decide, preseason when we're talking about breakouts or like who's going to be the next first time All-Star. Like, I'm going to keep coming back to him on all that stuff. I just still think the overall trajectory is, I just believe in him. He's been like bad in this series relative to what the Thunder need. And it seems like over and over, one, I think a lot of the time he's not, and I hate this analysis, but like he's not really forcing it maybe enough. And I guess in a specific way, because he does seem to be trying to get all the way to the basket a lot. Mm-hmm. And I know his mid-range frequency, certainly in his rookie year, was like, we don't like this. There's a little too much of this. And I think he scaled it back, but it's still like a real weapon for him. It feels like a concession though. It feels like it just like, I'm trying to like pretend I'm in his head. It seems like he thinks if I get an advantage driving and pull up and take like a 14-footer from the elbows, which like he's taken and made lots of those. And part of the reason he was the Thunder's fourth quarter leading scorer this year is like he was just making shots like that. He doesn't seem to want to shoot those. And so he's trying to get all the way to the basket, is not doing it, and is just, starting the cycle again by kicking out or like taking some tough layups. So maybe the answer paradoxically is like, you got to take more quote unquote bad shots, which are just get into your pull-up game. That feels like highly risky, because if it goes bad, then it's just like, well, you were never going to win trying to get to mid-range jumpers off the dribble. What a stupid idea. But the other stuff's not available. Like the Mavs defense is good enough. They have enough size and length to make it so J-Dub just isn't getting all the way to the basket. And when he is, there's bodies there and there's length there. So I think I don't know. It's not just be more aggressive. It's more of like the types of shots that he maybe doesn't want to take. He probably needs to take a few more of. And I know that runs against my whole thing of like, we got to get more free throws for the Thunder. I just, he just has been offensively, especially like not close to what he was during the season and what the Thunder like pretty clearly need him to be, because SGA is just, he's great. But I think with the exception of game 4, is like, not, he can't do it by himself. It's not enough against a defense this good.
No. And like for SGA specifically, he's not necessarily like the Thunder, the space they typically create. Yeah, he has pathways with which to navigate, but he's always operating in traffic. This has been like a whole new level of congestion for him to face and a lot of it is like guys around him aren't hitting threes for the series. You have Josh Giddey at 21.4%, Aaron Wiggins at 30.8%. Lou Dort takes them. He's at 32.4%, and he's also liable to go rogue and operate in isolation for some reason. Chet Holmgren at 25% is a big one, and then J-Dub at 31.3%. And so, that makes it at the bare minimum, the way to simplify it would be like they haven't done nearly there aren't enough guys hitting their threes to force Dallas to be less packed to paint on the deep. Like it just hasn't happened yet. And it's kind of kudos to Dallas, I guess, to reckon, because they were trailing, or they like that gut punch they suffered in game 4 to where it was, we could have been up 3-1, but they came away. I don't know if you saw the piece. I think Tim Cato from The Athletic had this. Someone from the Mavericks had said like, we should be like, this series should be over right now. So it's just, I'm very interested to see how the Thunder respond in game 6. But the key to them is, I don't like to boil things down to like, well, like you need to hit more threes, but like the defense has been there. Like I know Doncic is injured, but you've kept him and Kyrie in check for most of this series, and you can still win games when Doncic goes kaboom. We've seen just some peaks and valleys from Dallas's supporting cast on offense anyway. So I don't want to simplify it down to that, but like, especially if we can't expect J-Dub, you mentioned taking the shots he doesn't want to take or having some more counters, with the ball in his hands in the half court. If that's not something you're going to be able to bank on, then it definitely comes down to, well, it's not just about getting better spacing. It's about making the shots to shift Dallas's defense.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, Draymond too on I forget what portion of Inside last night or after, I guess after game 5, said like Dallas you reach a point in a series where one team sort of believes it has it figured out, and Dallas is at that point. And I actually think, to what you said and the comment about the series should be over, I think Dallas had it figured out in the game they lost. And SGA was too great making tough shots, the 12 of 16 mid-range game. Like, I think Dallas maybe has had like the recipe for longer than it seems, because they definitely had it in game 5. And now it's just, as I'm thinking back and I was, J-Dub needs to do this and that. It's like, well, you're still just suggesting like an individual guy just play better. which is not like a
Right.
systemic thing, which like, okay, so here's this adjustment like globally that the Thunder can make to capitalize on what Dallas is doing, like the counterpunch to Dallas's punch that keeps landing. And it's like, I don't know what that is other than, like you said, make threes, because Dallas is getting away with having Gafford guard. Maybe it's Giddey. They've had him on Aaron Wiggins weirdly, because he's definitely not the same level of shooter that Giddey is. Like, you should be able to punish that. And the paint's just loaded. So maybe it's Chet. Maybe it's Chet just like not doing the up fake, dribble into traffic, kick it out, just let it rip, because that's how you're going to pull some size out of the lane, right? Like otherwise, like, you're relying on Dort to make more threes. And I don't feel like that's a great way to go.
I do find it funny that I saw some people talk about, well, this is why like the Thunder needed to make a move for more size or make a better move than Gordon Hayward at the trade deadline. And it's one, the size thing. They're not, their defensive rebounding isn't great. It's not even close to the worst of the second round. And like their defense has not been the problem. It's their offense. And so who did you want them to go out and get? And I would also, this is one thing I would stress, and this is more of a, if we have to talk about their postmortem at some point, this is a reference point to say, okay, well, this is what we need. We needed to get to the playoffs with this group. Mm-hmm. So I understand. They were the number one seed in the West for the right. Like they didn't need to make a move. It's now clear what they might need moving forward, but that's why you get here and let this core kind of marinate.
The last thing I want to say, because we've not talked really about Dallas enough, the thought I had watching Game 5 was like a variation on, well, you just, like it used to be with LeBron, surround LeBron with shooters, and like that's just gonna work. And that also works with Luka. But the other thing you can do is surround him with like ridiculous athletes who are just going to be hunting lobs from three different guys on the floor at any given time are lob threats. And with Luka getting into, the 8 to 14 foot range of the floor and his vision and the attention he draws, it's just like, I mean, I don't know how many lobs Derek Jones finished. It felt like 15. It was probably like 5 in Game 5, but
he's so good at getting out on the break after defending his ass off on the
that's another way to go, man. You can just surround Luka with guys that can run faster and jump higher than the person guarding them, and you're going to do pretty well.
Let's talk about the Nuggets, who still just remain the no notes team, so we don't need to get too much into. I still remain impressed with what happened after those first 2 games against Minnesota, and specifically, I mean, we talked about some of the adjustments they've made, and I thought it took, I don't know if it's a lot of guts, but would teams in their position have made some of those fairly stark adjustments where it's like, oh, Aaron Gordon just bringing the ball up all the time. Aaron Gordon run pick and rolls. Jamal Murray's off the ball a ton. But I continue to marvel at just Nikola Jokic being the single most transcendent force in basketball right now. Like, how is the argument against it? And what I saw, what I didn't see, because I said this on another podcast that I was a guest on, was that people were talking about, they were getting out in front of, well, you can't criticize Rudy Gobert for not being able to defend Nikola Jokic. He's Nikola Jokic. And I was like, I didn't see anyone saying that about Rudy Gobert. And then I proceeded to, I guess, log back on, and I saw a ton of it. And so it's just, the thing is, so I saw it framed this way, where it's like, well, if you want to excuse and say this is a regular season award, and still say that Rudy Gobert is one of the best defenders of all time, you also have to believe that Nikola Jokic is one of the best offensive players of all time. Well, yeah, no shit. He might be the single most best offensive player of all time, or one of the 3 to 5 most valuable. What I think he's impressed, the fact that I could still watch him and just continue to be amazed at stuff he always did, like throwing the touchdown assist. So I don't even know who caught it. Just does it all the time. And I'm still, my jaw is agape.
Yeah.
But his mindset shifted, or not shifted, but like even Mike Inori said it. They dared him to be a scorer. He turned into a scorer. And like, that's just something that he's able to do. And he is like, he should probably have 4 MVPs at this point, which is mind melting to say. He has 3. He's the rightful MVP. And I just can't, you look at this Denver team and they're built so well, they're able to go through these adjustments, but we're still talking about a team that really only has one superstar. I know it's kind of been framed as like Murray's there and what he does in the postseason. He's injured now, but like there's still, you have to work around stuff Jamal Murray can't do. And the more I watch Nikola Jokic, the more we should probably wait till if and when they win the championship or something this year. But like, he's going to, maybe he won't force people because they'll dismiss him. But like, this is one of the greatest players of all time. And that's not a spicy take. it's more so we're gonna have to get into like, is he one of the 10 to 15 greatest players that we've ever seen?
Yes.
And by the end
Right
of his
now,
career,
yes.
the answer is yes. Yes. It's going to be yes.
I think, yeah, I would say like I do more giggling, like even if I'm just sitting by myself during Nuggets games when Jokic is doing stuff like specifically that touchdown pass. I just like you're sitting there. I'm just like laughing because like, what do you do with that? And he probably had a half dozen other plays like that that inspire the same reaction. I think it's difficult to find like new ways to say what we keep saying, which is that he's the best player in the world. And it's like, it's actually not that close. It doesn't feel like most of the time. I think this series against the Wolves showed as much as anything that Jokic can beat you if you successfully make him do the thing he doesn't want to do. Like, which is make him a scorer. Like you said, there's all these stats about game 5 specifically where he, his touch time was way longer on average than it was during the regular season and any of the other games of the series. He dribbled it like twice as much per touch, which is still not a lot. It was like 3 dribbles per touch to like 1.5 or whatever. But it's all of a piece of like, okay, we are going to do everything possible as the Wolves to make him score, to make him be someone that like doesn't have the passing options that he capitalizes on so well. Mm-hmm. And he just, it took some time, but eventually I think he just realized like, okay, this is how it has to be. And good enough. Like, I'll just get you 40 and not turn it over and get like, it's because if the playoffs are all about, and I know I like, this is broken record stuff for me, but if they're all about like the guys that get exposed are the ones that like can't do a thing. It's not like you have to be great at everything, but you can't have this exploitable weakness. And Jokic is like, there isn't a weakness one, but like even relatively speaking, the thing he's not quite as good at, or I don't know if even that's right to say, the thing he would prefer not to do, which is score. If you make him do that, he's so great at it that he can just win you games against the best defense in the league, against the 4-time defensive player of the year, doing the thing he would just, it's like kind of like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And then just like, and then he's unstoppable. Who else can you ever say that about? And on the Gobert point too, in the Lakers series or whenever even last year, it was, my thought was like Anthony Davis might be the human being best equipped to guard Jokic. And we could leave the series saying he is nowhere close to being able to do it. And it's not an indictment of Davis. It's just a testament to Jokic's greatness. Same thing here. It's like not any different. And the Wolves defense is phenomenal. Gobert's phenomenal.
Just like, look at how Rudy Gobert defended. Like, those are just tough shots. Jokic just hits them. He just
they're shots you never practice defending because nobody else shoots them. Like the wrong-footed hooks with either hand. Like all this stuff is like, there's no assistant coach on the roster that you drill with as Rudy Gobert that is going to prepare you for the like nonsense that Jokic throws up and just perfectly clean makes every time. You can't scout him. You can't prepare for him. He'll just do whatever the thing is that you like demand of him as a defender, and he'll be great at it. It's just like you can't be prepared. You can't be prepared to guard him. There's no possible way to do it.
Stat padding, no guess a player because we are pressed for time. I have an exercise though for Grant to go through that I think is really going to fuck him up though. Ooh. So it's exciting. Grant, are you ready?
No, but let's do it anyway.
Which NBA player has scored the most career points in the NBA Finals only? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, LeBron James, Jerry West, or Michael Jordan?
Jerry West.
That is correct. I thought you were going to get that wrong. 1,679. Elgin Baylor, Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson, or Bill Russell?
Oh, Elgin Baylor.
That is correct. I'm impressed. 1,161.
Lakers lost a lot of finals with West and Baylor, I think.
Larry Bird, Steph Curry, Shaquille O'Neal, or James Worthy?
Worthy feels like a red herring in there. I will say Steph.
You're on fire. That is correct. 928 points. Tim Duncan, Dennis Johnson, George Mikan, or Dwayne Wade?
I got to go Duncan.
That is incorrect. George Mikan, 741.
Ouch. Okay.
Tim Duncan had 708. He was in second.
All right.
Wilt Chamberlain, Scottie Pippen, Frank Ramsey, or Klay Thompson?
I hate that you're throwing in guys like Mikan and Ramsey. I'm going to say Klay Thompson.
Incorrect. He's dead last among this group. It's Scottie Pippen.
Wow. That would have been my last pick. So I'm all over the place now.
Julius Erving, Hakeem Olajuwon, Robert Parrish, or Tony Parker?
Ooh. I gotta go. Oh man, I don't know how many different. I'll say Hakeem.
That is incorrect. He's dead last among this group. It was Julius Erving with 561.
That was the challenge, right? See how many dead last in a row I can pick?
Right. So keep going. Danny Ainge, Kevin Durant, Manu Ginobili, or old Isaiah Thomas. I need to say that like IT was ever in the finals, but
yeah. Oh man, Thomas was in 2. Who? Ainge, Thomas, Ginobili,
or Kevin Durant.
I'll say Isaiah Thomas.
You overthought that, but you did pick last place again. Congratulations.
Or Kevin did Durant, I overthink it?
455. Rick Barry, Clyde Drexler, Derek Fisher, or Draymond Green?
Clyde Drexler.
That is incorrect. It's Draymond Green with 381. This was all super. These 4 were super close, though, if that makes you feel better.
Not really.
Ray Allen, Chris Bosh, Kyrie Irving, or Kawhi Leonard?
I'm going to go with Kyrie Irving.
That is incorrect. He is second, but Kawhi Leonard is first with 362. Walt Clyde Frazier, Pau Gasol, Karl Malone, or Dirk Nowitzki?
We know we got Dirk in at least a couple, Malone in a couple. I'll say Dirk.
Incorrect. He's dead last. Congratulations. Walt Clyde Frazier, 321 finals points. Jimmy Butler, Jason Kidd, Kevin Love, or Paul Pierce?
I'm so shook now since I almost want to pick dead last just to see if I can keep it going. I will say Paul Pierce.
Incorrect. He's not dead last, though. He's actually in second. Jimmy Butler, 265, first place. Kevin Garnett, Danny Green, Rip Hamilton, or Oscar Robertson?
I have to go Oscar.
He is dead last. Congratulations. Danny Green is the answer at 233.
We love Danny Green.
Final one. Bam Adebayo, Charles Barkley, Devin Booker, or Allen Iverson?
Bam, Barkley, Booker, Iverson. I'll go Iverson.
That is correct. 178 to lead that field. You close strong.
Boy. Rough stretch in the middle, though, I think.
Would you like to take us out of here?
Sure. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for rating, reviewing, and subscribing. If you have done so, if you have not, please hustle immediately to get on the bandwagon of being a part of the supporting group of the #1 media property in the galaxy. If you want to contribute more, like guest player, stuff like that, stat padding, join our Discord. The links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. Same with our merch. Find those in the same place. I think that's going to cover it. Enjoy the rest of the playoffs. We'll be back with you soon. Shout out Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.